The clock was cruel. Water rolled off Eric's jacket, pooling at his feet as he steadied an armful of plastic bags, barely aware of the honks and impatient faces streaming past in Midtown. For weeks, every waking hour had led to this moment, the biggest interview of his life, a shot at the kind of job that could change everything for him and his family back in Ohio. But here he stood, future on hold, helping June, a woman he'd never seen before, who gripped his arm with a quiet desperation. She was frail, but her grip was strong, fingers pressing thankfully into Eric's skin, leaving him with an unfamiliar warmth. As they made it to her building, June's laughter broke the rain's rhythm, catching Eric off guard. It wasn't just the cold making him shiver, it was the way June looked at him. Her eyes, bright but tired, seemed to see right through his nerves, right through his ambitions. Her scent lingered through his wet clothes, unexpected and gentle. He felt it, a strange mix of safety and tension, as if the city's rush had condensed into this one shared moment. Right then, the screen of Eric's phone buzzed. Missed call. Interview time. He'd never make it now. June squeezed his hand, gratitude passing between them wordlessly. Have you ever risked your future for a stranger's need? Drop your experience in the comments right now. Ever pulled an all-nighter for a moment like this? Eric had. He'd spent nights hunched over his laptop, chasing a dream job that seemed so close this morning. On a call with his best friend, he joked about taking Manhattan by storm. But now, the city's downpour mocked him. Eric glanced at June, hesitating. He could run, try to salvage his last chance, but June's gaze caught him. She didn't beg. She didn't explain. She simply stood there believing, maybe needing, that he'd do the right thing. He felt the tug, obligation wrestling with compassion. Around them, city life was relentless. Taxis jets through puddles. Sirens echoed somewhere close. But inside this cocoon of wet coats and clumsy groceries, Eric found warmth where he didn't expect it. June reached to return a stray item to his hand, her fingers pressing lightly against his skin, leaving a subtle tremor. They got to the door. June turned, inviting Eric into a small apartment that smelled like home. He paused. Could he catch his future if he walked out now, or was something bigger keeping him here? His hand froze on the threshold. Inside, comfort, connection. Outside, regret and ambition. What pulled harder? Rain edged sideways against the window, dulling the sounds outside. At June's kitchen table, Eric searched for the words that might make the sting of loss fade, but nothing came. June sat across from him, her sweater balled at her elbows, eyes a little less guarded now. She spoke quietly about her life, a husband lost, a city so big she sometimes felt invisible. Her loneliness echoed in the silence, drawing Eric closer with every word. Their conversation deepened, each sentence carving space between disappointment and hope. When June poured tea, she let her hands rest over Eric's for an extra second, the soft friction of skin against skin grounding them both in this fragile bubble. Intimacy flickered in small, unexpected gestures. As trust grew, June pulled out a worn photo. A man in a suit, her son, Matthew. She explained, pride mixed with worry, that he ran one of New York's biggest companies. Eric realized, heart-thumping, that his missed dream job was tied right here to June's family. The room felt close, the world suddenly smaller, and Eric wondered what strings fate was pulling. Would you give up a life-changing opportunity for a simple act of kindness? Comment with your story, it might just inspire someone. When Eric stood to leave, June surprised him with a hug, tight, thankful, a whisper near his ear. Through her window, Eric saw Matthew's SUV arrive, its lights slicing through the evening mist. Eric's pulse raced. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one building inside. The apartment changed when Matthew walked in. Tall, tailored suit, sharp eyes, he filled the cramped living room with presence, luxury clashing with modest warmth. He sized up Eric quick, outsider, risk-taker, untested. The meal felt formal, though they sat elbow to elbow at the old kitchen table. Tension shaped every word. Matthew didn't trust easily. He pressed Eric with questions about ambition, loyalty, sacrifice. Dinner slid into an interrogation, fork against plate echoing through the pauses. Eric tried to meet Matthew's gaze, but it was June's small touches that kept him steady, a hand to Eric's arm, a brush over his sleeve, her body angled protectively between them. Matthew's eyes darted, flicking to June's care for Eric. For a moment, the conversation paused, the sound of distant sirens filling the gap. Eric sensed a charge, something unspoken, a challenge about who June trusted more. It struck Eric, his kindness was under scrutiny, but the test ran deeper than any job interview. They weren't just asking about his future, they wanted to see what he'd risk for it. He straightened, breath steady, realizing truth demanded more than ambition. Through the window, flashing red lights spilled onto the sidewalk. Matthew turned abruptly, business phone in hand, grim. Something was wrong, and dinner ended not in comfort, but in uncertainty and chaos. Matthew's voice was sharp as he answered the call, tension flooding the room. Eric watched him, wondering if this was what power looked like under pressure, no calm, just quick, decisive movements. Something serious was happening to the company, and Eric felt a fresh sting of loss. The very job he'd missed was now threatened from the inside. June slipped her hand over Eric's under the table, thumb tracing a slow circle on his knuckle. Eric felt strength in that touch, as if June was transferring faith just when he doubted himself most. Matthew returned, face dark. "There's been a betrayal," he said quietly. "Someone I trusted's putting everything at risk." Suddenly, Eric's role changed. He wasn't a guest anymore, he was a possible solution or another risk. Matthew looked at him with expectation. Would Eric help solve the crisis, or step aside? The choice felt heavier than any interview. Eric weighed it in silence. He could make a difference, but at what cost? He glanced at June. Solidarity shone in her eyes. Together, they sat in the glow of an uncertain night, deciding whose trust, whose future, they protected. Matthew leaned in. "If you can spot what's wrong before I lose the company, you'll have earned a chance few do." Eric swallowed. High risk, high reward. The night thickened with suspense, the company's future hanging by a fragile thread. Night pressed close in June's apartment, the city's energy down to a whisper. Across from Matthew at the kitchen table, Eric felt the tension thicken with each passing hour. The clock's pressure hadn't faded. June hovered in the hallway, slippered feet soft on old tiles, her stare locked on Eric, steady and tender. Under faded overhead light, Eric laid out his plan for the crisis. The worry didn't just live in his words, it passed between glances, in the way June inched closer, her arm brushing his under the table. The touch was real, grounding, and electric. An old loneliness met a new longing. For a moment, time slowed as June's fingers traced a line down his forearm. Matthew shared something unexpected. Years ago, he'd missed an interview for a stranger too. The confession was sharp, a mirrored twist. Eric realized Matthew's challenge was more than business. It was character. Matthew asked Eric to trust his gut, and the answer wouldn't wait till morning. As pressure peaked and Eric's nerves frayed, June broke the silence. Her voice was unshaken. "Eric's loyalty doesn't bend." That line cut through the night, daring Matthew to reconsider. Eric stared out the window at the blinking city, a swell in his chest. He wasn't just fighting for work or pride, he was fighting for something fundamental. Morning would deliver an answer. Would it be enough? Daylight revealed tension instead of hope. Matthew returned to the kitchen early, voice rough, announcing a departure. Someone on the executive team had resigned overnight, leaving Matthew's company teetering. The word sabotage wasn't used, but suspicion thickened the air. Eric stepped to the counter, June beside him, her touch gentle and affirming. That warmth was all he could lean on as he dug into company emails, tracing odd patterns and inconsistencies. Matthew watched, skepticism replaced with cautious trust as Eric revealed clues, a sudden downturn, unusual messages, red flags nobody noticed. But being useful felt strange. Eric wasn't one of them. He felt both valued and distant, a visitor in their lives. June, sensing this, caught his hand with hers, a comfort that said he belonged, even when doubt pressed shut the door. At noon, Eric's phone buzzed. A text from inside the company: "I have information. Are you willing to risk it?" That offer promised chaos or redemption, with nothing guaranteed. Sudden and sharp, Eric found himself in the heart of the company, seated among executives and legal teams. Matthew introduced him with measured praise, tension making the space tight and cold. Questions fired back and forth. Eric presented his findings, links and messages, proof that a betrayal had unfolded. Doubt and accusation bounced from face to face. Power played out in quick exchanges. Matthew, passing Eric in the hallway, gripped his shoulder, a show of silent gratitude. Eric felt the weight, torn between fear and pride. June's voice piped up from the gallery, her perspective cutting through the clutter. She recalled her own betrayals, stories that moved the room closer to understanding Eric's struggle, how truth could be hard to accept, but even harder to ignore. The meeting ended abruptly, executives storming out. Eric was left with questions, not answers. A door closed, but was it the final word? After the meeting, Matthew pulled Eric aside near the office balcony, wind and traffic noise separating them from the company's chaos. Matthew's advice was personal, dipped in caution and encouragement. Eric listened, unsure what was mentorship and what was challenge. Eric wandered outside, tension written in his face. Alone for a second, June approached him, bold but gentle, tipping his chin so their eyes met. For a beat, time stilled, her lips parted only a breath away. Eric's hesitation melted into relief and risk as June pressed a slow kiss across his mouth. Matthew, weighing choices, confessed he was ready to walk away if Eric wouldn't step forward. The burden was high, and Eric felt the pressure. Loyalty, ambition, love, they all demanded something different. Word broke in the hallway: the company's fate was no longer in their hands. Eric now stood at the edge, one choice could set everything right or wrong. The final hour arrived. Matthew handed Eric a file, sensitive, tempting, laced with risk. The task was simple: choose between playing it safe or risking everything for integrity. Eric felt the tightness in his chest, a test heavier than any exam he'd ever taken. Outside the office, June found him alone behind the building, breath visible in cool air. She didn't speak. She pulled Eric close, wrapping arms around his waist. Their bodies pressed together, sharing warmth, their lips meeting in a desperate clutch. Each touch was a silent battle, between surrender and courage. Eric wanted answers, but the future slipped away beyond that alley. June whispered words of encouragement, steady and sure. Vulnerability met resolve, and Eric drew strength. Steeling himself, Eric strode back to the company entrance. Every step felt weighted, dignity measured against gain. Have you ever faced a make-or-break moral test? Drop your hardest choice in the chat. Inside, all eyes were on Eric. The building's walls didn't feel comforting or hostile, they just felt real, and Eric knew he had to choose what kind of man he wanted to be. The storm inside the company echoed outside, but June refused to let Eric fight alone. She reached out to employees, sharing words about Eric's integrity, her own conviction cutting through the cynicism. People listened. Staff who'd barely spoken before began to see Eric as someone more than an outsider, someone who cared, who'd risked comfort for what was right. Later, after a round of tense emails and sharp conversations, June found Eric sitting alone on a stairwell deep in the building. She slid beside him, silence speaking for them. Her hand traced slowly down his back, each contact reminding Eric of what courage felt like up close. Their faces drew together in a private moment, warmth passing between them, confession carried not just in words, but in a shared breath. With trust rebuilt, Matthew reconsidered. He called Eric to his office and admitted he'd misjudged him. The company needed fresh eyes, a bold heart. Eric wasn't expected to save everything, just to help lead a new way forward. End of day, Matthew offered Eric a real place, no empty honors, but a tough role. The dream was closer, but not without challenge. The terms were clear: loyalty, work, honesty. Would Eric accept? Success wasn't just a job offer, it was a crossroads. Eric had to choose where loyalty mattered most. Matthew's proposition was generous, but it came with complications: a high position, but also expectations. Night blanketed Manhattan. Eric walked beside June through quiet streets, city lights reflected in puddles. They talked freely, words about choices and fears tumbling out. June's hand slipped into Eric's coat, her fingers finding his pulse, his lips pressing close in the chilly air. For them, intimacy grew with every truth confessed, every doubt shared. Love wasn't easy, but it was real. The pull between ambition and connection brought Eric to the edge. Could he chase big dreams and still honor what June meant to him? He weighed both with care. A call came that night. Another offer. Eric faced two futures, neither simple. It was time to decide what he truly valued most. The next morning arrived heavy. Legal issues hit Matthew's company. Eric faced fresh tests of loyalty. In the shadows of an old umbrella, June drew Eric close as Manhattan's rain hammered down. Their hands locked, their faces inches apart, the world outside faded to distant thunder. Matthew stood his ground, publicly crediting Eric for successes, privately thanking him for loyalty. He didn't just honor Eric, he gave him room to lead, driven by trust. June's support never wavered, she kept Eric steady through wild ups and downs. As the storm slowed, Eric saw that the future wasn't about old mistakes, it was about new beginnings. At the edge of a big choice, he paused, wondering where loyalty really lived. Change was close, but nothing would be simple. The city glowed with fresh rain. Eric found himself back where it all began, standing in Manhattan, soaked, doubts and dreams battling inside. In June's apartment, they shared a different kind of intimacy: soft words, tender touches, truths shared through quiet glances. June spoke clear and true, a confession about her hopes and fears, her love for Eric. He answered not with promises, but with action. Their final private night together was slow and gentle, marked by hands that lingered and hearts that beat in tandem. Two people, changed by storms and choices, found what mattered in each other. Matthew reached out, offering support, not as boss, but mentor. He freed Eric to choose his path, trusting him with future decisions. This twist turned rivalry into partnership and control into guidance. Eric stepped into his new life: career, love, respect earned, not given. The choice was his, and this time, he chose both. 1 year passed. Eric stood outside June's building, a place now filled with memories, laughter, quiet mornings, and shared challenges. Their bond was stronger, tested and rebuilt by storms and bright days alike. In the kitchen, morning sunlight painted gentle stripes across the floor. June moved into Eric's arms, their embrace long and meaningful, every touch celebrating chances taken and sacrifices made. This love was shaped by hard decisions and deep honesty, by willingness to risk for each other and for something bigger. Eric looked at June and saw both past hardship and present joy, a life made by two people who never gave up. His future was secure, but his gratitude ran deep. He turned to the viewers. Would you risk it all, just for a stranger? If this story moved you, like, subscribe and comment your moment of truth. Every journey starts with a choice. June always said real love was a storm worth walking through. Eric stood in the rain, not afraid anymore, but grateful.